Okay, this is the continuation now of Jesus is Blind in the New Testament is Fake series. The date again of this recording is July 17, 2017. And so this is part 2 of Jesus is Blind. I'm continuing this lesson. Now if we go down, as I was saying in part 1, from Isaiah 41 and verse 8, when it says, "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen," that the servant is not Jesus, but is the nation of Israel. Now, if you run on in that same chapter down to verse 14, that the Christians and the Israelites try to hide from, in verse 14 it says, "Do not fear, you worm Jacob." So he said up here that the servant was Jacob, and he's still talking to Jacob or the children of Israel. "Do not fear, you worm Jacob, you insect Israel." So what? He's talking to his servant, right? So let's read verse 8 and verse 14 again. "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend." In verse 14, "Do not fear, you worm Jacob, you insect Israel." Together again. "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, do not fear, you worm Jacob, you insect Israel." You hear that? Because the servant is Israel, or the servant is Jacob. It's the nation, not a single person called this Mashiach from 2,000 years ago. "I will help you, says the Most High, your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel." Everyone knows who read the Old Testament that the Holy One of Israel is the Creator, or what you might think of as being the Father. Not the Son, the Father. So tell me now, from verse 14, "I will help you, says the Most High, your Redeemer." He's going to help his son Jesus? And the silly answer is, yeah, because he resurrected him and so on. It's just crazy. He's helping his son. Why does Elohim, who created all things, when he says, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth," need all this help all the time? You create all this entire earth and world of everything that you see, and you need so much help. You can't protect yourself, you can't fight yourself and so on from your enemies, so you need all this help. And now if we go to verse 17, he's still talking about Jacob, or the nation of Israel, who is a servant. So now look when it says in verse 17, "When the poor and needy seek water and there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst, I, the Most High, will answer them." See that I told you 41 verse 8 was not about him, this servant, meaning a single person, but it was about them, Israel, or them, the people of the nation of Israel, or them, the children of Jacob. And he says he's still talking through this whole chapter about that servant and showing that it's them. So now he switches over to them, because sometimes in scripture you read like that Israel is referred to as a single person, sometimes referred to in the plural as them or they. And here now he goes on with it, they, right? And saying, "I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them." Now, if you tell me that because it says a servant, that is Jesus, and that is singular and starting about Jesus. Well, when it is plural right here as them and them in verse 17, twice, then why can't that refer to the nation of Israel? And you say, yeah, well, that's fine, because that part is referring to the nation of Israel, but the first part in verse 8 is talking about Jesus. Well, the chapter is consistent with talking about Jacob or Israel. It's consistent. It doesn't break from that, all the way from 8 to 17. So all these people are just using their trickery to continue to get you to worship Jesus, who will be destroyed by the Most High in the end. And the people who set him up and continue to teach him, even the Hebrews, are going to get their judgment from the Most High. You know, I was thinking at first that, yeah, if you're just believing in Jesus, talking about the Hebrews now, and if you're teaching Jesus and so on, that you just need to come, you just need to return and drop that and so on, drop this Jesus stuff. But as I reread the Bible more and more, I'm starting to change a little bit with that. Because, yes, I do believe if you're calling in Jesus and so on, that you're going to come over because he's coming to rescue us. But I'm starting to think by certain things that I'm reading in the scripture, but I've studied some more, that the ones, like the general masses, we're just being, we've been confused and lied to by the Christian church, by the teachings in the Christian church. So we just believe in Jesus. So, when we come over to the Hebrew understanding, we continue to believe in him because of the teachings here. But then you got those Hebrew teachers who know already and understand that the Jesus stuff is wrong, and they still continue to do it, but use it to hook the people, right? And to keep them so that their camps will grow and so on. And they're working for whoever it is in the world that they're working for. But they make it seem like they're working for Jesus and the Most High. And those two don't go together. They don't work together. But those ones at the top who know in the Hebrew community, who know already in their mind, not talking about know publicly, because they're not going to tell you that they know it publicly because they are liars, but the ones who know privately in their mind, and when they lay in their bed and walk through their house and sit in their couch in their house and so on, and when they sit in their camp and they're discussing it with the top ones of them that are running the camp, operating the camp, when they know among themselves in their heart that this Jesus stuff is fake, but they continue to do it just to deceive the rest of the Israelites that are coming back to the Most High, those ones, I'm starting to think, just cannot be saved. You will be judged, you will be cut off, you'll be done for. There is a difference, and I'm going to look into it some more to teach you, but there is a difference between you just simply being deceived and you're searching for the Most High. When you find the proper thing, you're going to take it on and change and say, Father, forgive me, I thought Jesus was right, but blah, blah, blah. There's a difference between that kind of person and the person who knowingly runs a camp or a movement and teaches that you should worship him when they know that he is not to be worshipped. That person is different. They're operating in a different kind of way. That person is going to be judged. So where is I? Verse 17. Let's run over now to Isaiah chapter 44 and verse 1. But now hear, O Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. See, it's still saying, Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. You see, it's silly. It's like in Isaiah 41 verse 8. It's the same stuff here he's saying with Isaiah 44 verse 1. Israel, my servant, whom I have chosen. He chose Israel because he made a nation, a group of people out of them. Do you choose your own child that you gave birth to? Do you choose them initially? They're just yours automatically, by nature. So why, if the servant that the prophet is speaking of is Jesus, when the Most High is showing that he chose this servant? He called Israel. So he says, Israel, whom I have chosen. If it was his son Jesus, he wouldn't have to choose him. It would just be his from birth. But he says, I have chosen you, says the Most High, who made you, who formed you in the womb and will help you. Right? Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen, which is meaning Jerusalem. Right? So he is calling them now, choosing them, right? And saying, Jacob, my servant, whom I have chosen. So he points out who the servant is that he chose. The servant is Jacob. Are you saying Jesus is Jacob? Because you're going to tell me if it was Joshua, you'd say Jesus is Joshua, or Joshua means Jesus, means Savior. Well, it's Jacob, the man Jacob, Jesus. No, it's not. But when Jacob is referring to the nation, is that Jesus? Obviously, no. Listen to the rest of it that exposes this wrong teaching again, that this servant is Jesus, right? Because I'm showing you that this Jesus, if he is the servant, he is blind, because it clearly says, my servant who is blind. So if he's blind, he cannot save you. But I'm at the same time showing you that the servant is not Jesus. The servant is one who was blind because they lost the way of Torah. That's what made them blind. They slipped into darkness spiritually. That's what it means. So 44 verse 3, for I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon your descendants. Right? Now, where are Jesus' descendants? And does it include all the Christians who are saying they are his as well? And they're singing about Father Abraham? and had many sons, and I'm one of them. So as soon as somebody joins the religion of Christianity, Abraham is their father and they are a descendant of Abraham. But I will pour my spirit upon your descendants. Where are the descendants of Jesus? Where are the children that Jesus had? But as the nation of Israel, or the nation that came out of Jacob, their descendants are the children that they physically gave birth to, that they physically had, that came after them. And the descendants are still alive. They were taken, as I mentioned earlier, in part 1, in the captivity on ships and in other captivities in time in the scripture, right? And the Most High said in places like Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12, He's going to gather these descendants back to their land from the different countries that they were scattered in through slavery. And all these top university people and well-educated people who look like they've never gone to church in their life and they don't know anything about the Bible and so on, and they don't know who black people are, they very well know that we are the slave descendants. So don't let them fool you. People know who the children of Israel are. The common person on the street might not know, but the people who really study history and so on, they know exactly who the children of Israel are. We are the children of Israel. And you are commanded by the Most High to return to His commandments, which also says, do not worship any other God in any form. So now, chapter 44 goes on to say, they shall spring there, and my blessings on your offspring. So where are the offsprings of Jesus if this servant and Jacob is Jesus? They shall spring up like a green tamarisk, like willows by flowing streams. The one will say, I am the Most High. Another will be called by the name of Jacob. Yet another will write on the hand, the Most High, and adopt the name of Israel. I am the first and the last, and beside me there is no God. Look at that. You are my witnesses, verse 8. Is there any God beside me? There is no other rock, I know not. But Paul will tell you in Corinthians that Jesus is the rock. But the Most High is saying He's the rock and there is no other. So now let's run over to Isaiah chapter 42 and verse 19. This is here where it's saying, who is blind? Who is blind but my servant, or deaf like my messenger whom I sent? Who is blind like my dedicated one, or blind like the servant of the Most High? Verse 20, He sees many things but does not observe them. His ears are open but He does not hear. And so no, that's not no. If this is Jesus, then He is blind. If the servant is Jesus, then Jesus is blind and He cannot lead anyone, because it's telling you that this blind servant, listen to it how it sounds now. If the servant that is Jesus, if the servant is Jesus, listen what it would say. That this servant is blind and this servant is deaf. And this servant in verse 20 sees many things but does not observe them, so he's blind. So how can Jesus be so blind but be teaching all these marvelous truths and the Beatitudes and so on? And people are saying, never a man spoke like this, never a man taught like this. Then that means that the New Testament is lying, because if He's blind and He sees things and can't understand them, can't observe them and so on, then He couldn't have been teaching all these marvelous things. It's a lie. They copied those things from the Old Testament and just formulated a testament out of it called the New Testament. His ears are open, but he does not hear. So it's saying that that particular servant has all these issues about them. What kind of maimed son is this that the Most High is sending as a servant for salvation? When the Most High says already that in the law that the maimed and wounded animal cannot be used as a sacrifice. So how can Jesus be maimed like this, blind and deaf and so on, and be used to offer up a master sacrifice on Calvary to restore the nation of Israel and redeem them from their many transgressions? The servant cannot be Jesus. It is impossible. Impossible, because your teaching is really meaning that Jesus is blind, but you just don't want to add that part to it. You just stop at the servant part and say Jesus is a servant. Now if you go up to verse 17, they shall be turned back and utterly put to shame, those who trust in carved images, who say to cast images, you are our gods. They're going to be put to shame in the end, who trust in this kind of stuff. Let's look here now in Matthew chapter, run over to the New Testament. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 5. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Now, he couldn't see and understand stuff from what was just shared in Isaiah chapter 42. So, what is he teaching? If he can't observe things, understand, and so on, what is he teaching? He just tells you that this chapter, like the rest of the chapters in the New Testament, were just made up. And if he's blind, how does he instruct people according to spiritual light and spiritual sight? To the point where he has the power that comes from a spiritual life and spiritual understanding and spiritual power to be even giving sight physically to people who are physically blind. It just don't make sense. It does not make any sense. That he is giving physical sight to people who are physically blind, but he is in spiritual darkness himself, because the Most High says that his servant Jesus, if it is meaning that, is blind spiritually. See how confusing the New Testament sounds? Now let's run over to Matthew chapter 12 and verse 22. Then was brought unto him one possessed with a devil, blind. So the devil is blind just like the servant Jesus. But here, this is a blind devil causing blindness, I should say. So that means that there's spiritual activity going on out of blindness is what I should be saying. Right? Making the man, because if you're physically blind, you see, all these ailments here in the New Testament are meant to show the spiritual light and power and operation of Jesus. And if he's making the lame walk, spiritually, you're going to understand that he'll make you walk in the right path of Torah. And if you're blind and he's giving sight to you physically, he's showing you, spiritually it means he's showing you the light of truth from Torah. So that's why they're putting all these miracles here to show his power, right? That he's really from God, quote unquote God. Then was brought unto him one possessed with a devil, blind and dumb, and he healed him, insomuch that the blind and dumb both spake and saw. So again, here it is. He is giving sight to people who are physically blind, but he does nothing about his own spiritual blindness. Because if he's a servant of the Most High, in Isaiah, then that servant is spiritually blind. And now this same Jesus himself said, how are you going to cast out the little speck that's in my eye? Wouldn't you first cast out the log that's in yours? So if that's the case, why is he taking care of the lesser speck and ignoring the greater log that's in the eye? Well, why is he taking care of the lesser problem of blindness, which is physical blindness, when the heart is spiritually blind or dark? When Jesus is spiritually blind because the Most High said his son, his servant, rather, is spiritually blind. If you tell me that the servant in Isaiah 42:19 is Jesus, why is it that the servant is spiritually blind, but he's walking around giving physical sight to people? Wouldn't he take care of the bigger problem, which is his spiritual sight, his spiritual blindness? Because after you heal the people physically, wherever you get the power from, then after you get the person to see physically, they're going to want to learn something from you spiritually. They want spiritual sight from you because you have made them better physically in their body, so they're going to be drawn to you and attracted to you. And then you can't lead them anywhere spiritually because you're in darkness yourself. So it would be better to take the log out of your eye or take care of your spiritual darkness and your spiritual blindness and then heal the person of their physical problem so that when they see, now you can instruct them spiritually. And then when they go off, they can continue to use their spiritual side by reading from Torah with their physical eyes to continue to search more and see more of the light of understanding of Torah in their heart based on being able to read with the physical sight that they now have, because you healed their eyes from physical blindness. This servant in Isaiah is not Jesus. Impossible. But as you say, the servant is Jesus, then that also means that you're telling me this servant Jesus is blind spiritually. How is he going to give salvation to you or anybody? Even when the Most High, through the scriptures, is saying he's going to lead the blind by a way that they have not known, how is Jesus being blind going to lead Israel back in a way that they have not known because they got away from it? How's he going to lead them when he's spiritually blind? A way that they have not known. That means you're going to have to look carefully to see the way. Jeremiah 6:16, stand in the way and see. Because that's how you're going to walk the path. Lamp is a light to my foot, right? And my pathway, right? Your word, right? So you need to see spiritually. So if the servant is blind, how are you going to see? He's telling you you're blind and you got no light for your pathway and for your feet because you left off the Torah instructions which map out the way and shed light on the path that you should walk. So if the servant is blind, that means Jacob, the children of Israel, are blind. But if it is Jesus who is the servant who is blind, he's got no light of Torah to lead you in the path. So he's got no way to walk himself in the right path because he can't see the way because he is blind. Jesus is blind. But I'm sure you'll be in church this Sunday morning. And maybe in Sabbath. For the Sabbath teachers. Teaching the same thing. Now Matthew chapter 15 and verse 14. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. This is Jesus speaking now. They got his words in red. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind. It's interesting to note something that I never saw all these years in Christianity and didn't see it until now. He says, leave them alone, for they are blind teachers of the blind. They are blind leaders of the blind. Just because they are blind, because you got these Hebrew camp teachers who are starting camp after camp, branch after branch, and because they look like they're growing so much, you say, oh, the Most High is with them and the Most High is doing this and so on. And they're growing so much, but they're teaching you to worship Jesus. But Jesus himself, who they worship under a Hebrew code name, Yahweh Shai, and maybe other Hebrew words that they make up, he himself said, as written in words of red, that they are blind leaders of the blind. Which means he's telling you that the people who follow him, which to me means follow him erroneously against Torah, are people who are themselves blind. Because make sure you understand that the text is showing in Matthew 15:14 that these leaders of the blind are not sitting down doing zero. They are doing something. They are active. They are leaders. So they starting camp after camp, branch after branch, church after church, Christian church after Christian church, house group after house group, Hebrew camp after Hebrew camp, website after website. They are productive. They are doing something. They are leaders, right? They are leaders, and leaders do stuff. They get stuff done. So they are active, and leaders are also these kind of leaders that he's talking about that are so well known that it was even brought to him so that he could be addressing them. They're obviously well in the limelight. So they're like these big churches and these well-known Hebrew camps who are so well known because they are so very active that they're growing off of teaching Jesus, that they can be noticed. And so he notices them that they're doing stuff because they are leaders, and leaders get things done. And he says they are leaders of the blind. So they are doing something. They are leading people. That means people are following them. They are leaders of the blind. And that's what's happening in your Hebrew camp and in your Christian churches. Your pastors and your camp leaders and your mores who are teaching about Jesus are leading you somewhere, but they do so blindly. They lead you in darkness. And the same Jesus said, if the blind lead the blind, won't they stumble and fall into the ditch and so on? You're walking around and you're stumbling and falling all the time. You're bumping into stuff. That's why every time you turn around, another person is being risen up by the Most High. Like I just joined this game with this Jesus fake teaching recently, to add to the many others who were teaching this stuff for years. So what the Most High is doing is he's showing you that the more you keep following these Jesus Yahweh Shai teachers, you keep being led in darkness, running around in a circle. You keep stumbling, falling, bumping into these teachings when the Most High raises up another one of us to teach again that you should not be serving this ridiculous Jesus, this false Jesus, this false God. So you bump into our teachings all the time. You bump into our teachings all the time. Why? Because you're just the blind being led by another blind person. A blind teacher is leading you. And so you're both bumping into these teachings, and you know your teachers are bumping into it, because they're having to tell you all the time to fend off these attacks. They have to tell you all the time, don't listen to that person, don't listen to that brother, don't listen to that sister, don't listen to that brother. They got to tell you that because they're bumping into the teachings themselves. And when you bring it to them, they tell you don't listen. They're tired of bumping into these teachings. They're tired of doing the lessons to tell you that, oh, it's wrong, it's Yahweh Shai the Savior. So they just say now, you know what, don't listen to them. Stop listening to this person. Stop listening to them. But he says the blind leaders are actually leaders of the blind. And look at this. It's like Peter didn't even understand, because something must have been wrong with Peter. Because in verse 15 it says, then answered Peter and said unto him, declare unto us this parable. So basically he's trying to get more understanding because it seems strange. It seems strange. So then in verse 16, and Jesus said, are ye also yet without understanding? It's like, you don't understand this? No, people shouldn't just understand lies. So he has to give extra words now to force in the lies, right? Do not ye yet understand? Right? And he goes on talking about whatever he was teaching of, right? So, I don't know. I don't know. You need to just take some time and start searching for yourself above the information, meaning get more information than what they teach you about this Jesus, so you can find it for yourself. Okay, so I'll cut it here again, and I will make part 3 to this lesson. Jesus is blind. And remember, if you tell me the servant in Isaiah 42:19 and Isaiah 41:8 and 44 verse 1, if that servant is Jesus, then you're really saying that this servant Jesus is blind. If Jesus is blind, he cannot lead anyone to the light of salvation.